Today on the Videomaker Podcast, Chris and I talk all about the new DJI 4D. It's a really, really wild camera. If you haven't heard about this, it's been out, or the news has been out for a couple weeks. I recommend you look this up. Look at a photo of it. It's like a cinema camera with a gimbal attached to the front that holds the lens and the sensor. Really bizarre form factor. Does some really innovative things. So there's a lot to discuss here. As always, if you've been listening to the podcast and you enjoyed it, we'd love it if you went to iTunes or Spotify and hit the subscribe button or the heart button or the follow button or the like button, whatever it's called in your podcast app. It's a big help for us, and hopefully it's more convenient for you. So with all that out of the way, let's get on with the show. Welcome to the Videomaker Podcast. I'm Mike Wilhelm, and with me, as always, is Chris Monlux.
Hello.
And boy, some more exciting news. I know it's been a couple weeks since we last met up to discuss the MacBook Pro. So this news is a few weeks old now, but I think it's worth discussing. The DJI Ronin 4D, new cinema camera, I guess, which is, I don't know, Chris, it's like its own form factor. It's part camera, part robot, which I guess is not new for DJI, but certainly new to the pro video market.
Yeah, it's like, so the idea here is it's a camera and it's a gimbal and it's a camera gimbal.
Yeah, with no propellers.
No, exactly. But it's a 4-axis gimbal. So you have your normal axes, and then you also have up and down like a sled and vest would offer you.
Yeah.
So it's definitely ready to go right on set. And start shooting, which if you're a specialty shooter that shoots handheld or, Steadicam, this is like your dream come true. Now you can not have, well, it's probably, I don't know, maybe it's heavier than what you're used to if you're used to wearing a sled and vest, the way it's distributed everywhere.
Put an easy rig on it or something.
Yeah, I guess that's true. But regardless, it's all in one. It's super weird looking, looks kind of like a little dinosaur with its head sticking out. It's got removable handles on it that you can control from another location. Because it's DJI, they have the ability to wirelessly transmit video from it too. There's a lot of technologies in drones that haven't made it into the like normal workflow of cameras. And I think this is what I hope it is. I don't know if this is going to be a camera for everyone. I mean, I don't shoot handheld all the time or much at all. I'm curious because we should be getting one maybe today or maybe Monday, but that is like, how useful is this when I don't want to shoot handheld?
Well, Chris, you mentioned this to me the other day, that this is a handheld camera. I obviously wouldn't argue that this is a camera optimized for handheld shooting. And that's certainly what DJI is showing off, its handheld capabilities. But at the same time, I don't see anything that precludes it from being a stationary camera, right? Like, why couldn't you just put it on a tripod or a slider?
No, I mean, I think you could. I think, slider might be a hard one because it's a weird weight distribution. Might be a hard one to keep from sagging.
All you need there is a plate that shifts it,
Yeah, whatever that ends up being. I think it's just one of those things where it's it might not be the best tool for that because of something. But sure. I mean, let's go down because this is interesting to me. 35 millimeter full frame CMOS sensor. Now it's got a DX mount, which is DJI's mount, and they have 3 lenses for it: a 24, a 35, and a 50 millimeter f2.8. But you can also get a E-mount adapter for it, and there's.
I don't think it's an adapter. I think the whole mounting system, it comes off. And is replaced.
Okay, so you have just a disc that you put in there. So it's got probably the same flange distance or something.
Yeah.
And the really cool thing about that is there's a bunch of Sony lenses that are supported for this. This reminds me of when the Inspire 2 and the ZenMuse X5 and cameras came out. I was like, what lenses can I use on this? And I'm curious because I'm not sure if they ship with lenses or is it, without. I haven't looked deep enough in that. But you can shoot, let's see here, it's like up to 6K RAW. Let's see, Apple ProRes RAW. Let's see here, where's...
DJI, by the way, has on their 4D site a document of the lens compatibility.
Yeah.
It's pretty extensive. There's a lot of Sony lenses on here.
Yeah.
And these are only
Sony
lenses.
Mounts, but there could be a Sigma, it could be a Tamron.
Yeah, they got Zeiss on here. They got Sigma, all that.
Seems like the support, though, for multiple lenses is really the E mount is really the biggest
for sure. Yeah,
there.
I mean, E mount is there's I don't know. I don't want to say 10 times more, but probably 4 times more than any other category.
There's actually a list, which is
exactly.
different than in the past when the Zenmuse came out. I was like, these are the lenses that work with it. It's not going to balance with anything else. And that's and that's also what they're taking in court here is balancing the gimbal. This is instead of worrying about the camera that goes on the gimbal, you're having to worry about the weight of the lens and that kind of thing. So
and
that
also
should be interesting.
Also the connectivity with the camera itself because of the crazy focusing system.
So you have to have focus by wire, which of course is perfect for Sony lenses. They're all that way and gives you a lot more control with that, which is really pretty awesome that you could give someone else control over that while you're operating it. That's just from right out of the box. It seems pretty cool. I love that. I'm curious, like, whose sensor is this? Like, have we seen a full frame sensor from DJI before? I mean, we've seen Hasselblad big, sensors, but they're not saying this is a Hasselblad sensor or anything. I mean, maybe it is, and maybe it came from that thing, but likely Sony's making it because I think they make just about everybody's sensor, but it's just interesting. It's like they're saying dynamic range of 14 stops, which is good. I mean, it's not like crazy cinema camera good, like, something you're going to find out of high-end cinema camera. You're going to find definitely, a couple to a few more stops there. But that's still nothing to scoff at. You can shoot in D-Log. It's got an HLG profile. Oh, it's got built-in ND filters, 9 stops of ND filters, which I think is really big deal just for the sake of let's start building in ND filters into cameras. I mean, let's still photographers need them too. And like on the Sony RX100, they have an electronic ND filter built in, and that's just a little point and shoot, but it's because they know the lens that's on there because it's always on there. And so it's harder to build those things in. But, you look up into the Sony's FX line, like the FS6, and they have that variable electronic ND, which is just rad. Those are the type of things. Don't give me more resolution. Don't give me more dynamic range. Give me better workability. I would really love to have awesome NDs in everything.
That's one of the features of the old ENG camcorders, which it was a great feature, which is a shame that it hadn't made it into these new interchangeable lens cameras until just recently. Yeah,
well, that's why I like the adapters for the Canon R series or R cameras, just to be able to have EF on there. You can have built-in NDs on any EF lens if you use that adapter, but it's an expensive adapter, but it's a variable ND. I mean, variable NDs aren't cheap anyway.
For sure.
But it's, that I remember getting excited about that. I'm excited about an adapter. I must be growing up. I don't know. I was, and being like, this, I could see the use of this. And that's what I always get excited about is like when they say something, I'm like, I could use that for this. Like, I wanted to do that. Like, I remember the first time they're demoing drones following another drone. I'm like, I could use drone to follow a drone. I want to try that. And of course, I failed miserably. It was not, the technology was not there. And obviously what they were showing us was not real. But I think you could be there now with the Air 2S that we just reviewed. I'm wondering if it's maybe too small. Maybe it won't be, depending on how close you are to whatever it is. But it might do that. So I'm just curious of like what kind of technology is going to come out of these. I mean, DJI is making a camera. Like, so who's going to be the next to make a gimbal integrated camera? I don't think anybody else is positioned for it.
I mean, the thing with DJI is they're a robotics company.
Yeah.
Right. Sony makes a lot of things. I don't think they make robots. Canon doesn't make robots. Samsung.
They do. PTZ cameras are robots.
I guess so.
And those are robotic, and that's robotic movement and that kind of thing. But Sony's not making any gimbals.
Yeah.
There's not a gimbal from Blackmagic or Canon. So they might have to work with somebody else, which, we've seen before. I mean, how Zeiss is on a lot of Sony stuff. They're discrete companies. They're not connected in any way. They work in partnership to make things happen. So I think that's, it can happen. But just like DJI, to come out with something that no one can catch up to really quickly.
You know what?
And that's what's kept them in the drone leadership market is their ability to release the next features that are a year away in other brands' drones now. So they're always ahead.
It's clear that they invest a lot in R&D. That they put a big emphasis on innovation, which is just so refreshing to see in the camera market, where we have seen for years a linear progression in camera capabilities. Autofocus that is better than the last autofocus, more resolution.
A little more bit depth, maybe.
Yeah, exactly. Better low light performance. But these sort of iterative things from camera to camera. It's great to see something that's just like kind of out of left field and totally bizarre. Not bizarre, but, just new.
Yeah.
And, there's a lot of things about this camera that are unusual. I'll say that, and exciting. But you know what? The thing that, and I think the gimbal is maybe what might get the most attention because it's sitting there stuck to the front of the actual body.
It makes it look so strange. Yeah.
Yeah. It doesn't even look like a camera.
Yeah.
But the thing that is most interesting to me is the LiDAR focusing system.
Yeah. That should be really interesting to see what that means as far as performance goes, because everybody else is talking about phase detection, your contrast detection. You're talking about dual pixel autofocus from Canon, or a combination of contrast and phase detection. This is different. This is getting information from the sensor based on light,
like real depth.
Yeah, and giving you that information. So that should be really interesting. And on a gimbal, you need good autofocus, so it makes some good sense.
Exactly.
Now, the big catch about this is the LiDAR. There's a little adapter that goes on the top of it. That goes. It's actually another camera that is doing that, and I think that's extra.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, I think that's not included in. I think there's still LiDAR, but I'm unfortunately, the presentation I got was quite sped up. But let's see here. I don't know what else where I could find it, but yeah, it seems really interesting. Let's face it. This is an Osmo to the next level, right?
A LiDAR rangefinder is in the box.
Oh, in the box. So it's an extra thing. It's not maybe something you have to buy extra, but it's not something you put on top of it, which is great, which is cool, because LiDAR, I've seen LiDAR being used in other technology. I've never seen it in this capacity, so that'll be really interesting.
This is another step in the direction that is an argument against the never use autofocus philosophy, right? Like, autofocus is getting very good, and we haven't tried this, but it looks like it's going to be quite good.
Yeah, well, I've been escaping it more and more, because right now you and I are both on autofocus in this shot, and I use it. And now, given we're not dynamic at all, we're just sitting here, so it finds a face and it stays with it, and we're giving it a lot of light, so it's not hard.
Yeah,
but absolutely, some of the newest technologies in autofocus are not only usable, they might be better than you. They might be able to do what you want it to do in better ways. One thing, what I really like is what you can do with the new iPhone footage, and you can actually change the focus point after the fact.
Yeah,
and you can do all that editing, and that's I actually didn't mention it in our past one, but in the new MacBook Pro and the actually new Final Cut, it'll take that data and you can actually adjust it in Final Cut.
Yeah, so there's another innovation that we're kind of waiting on the camera industry to catch up with, is this multi-lens systems that allow you to do that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think what I hope flexibility with like workflow flexibility. It might be something that we see innovation in. And I think this is one of those things where I no longer have to put a camera on a gimbal. It's ready to go. It's the camera that you shoot that way. And the question is, if you shoot a lot that way, how is it going to be as a normal camera as well? That's what I'm real curious about. We'll get it on a tripod and try to use it like I would anything else, and see if it's cumbersome or strange, because it is a new form factor and everything. But I mean, I just think about at the trade shows at what would have been NAB. Is DJI going to have a big old booth because they have cameras now? I mean, because all the camera companies all have big old booths. Mm-hmm. So does that mean like they're truly like stepping into that world? Because DJI also has, their enterprise and agricultural drones and that kind of stuff. But this is continuing in this digital imaging space in a much bigger way than I'd say even drones. Drones are a specialty tool.
Mm-hmm.
This might be more useful than a drone, or it should be. It's a camera by itself.
Yeah.
But I mean, I know I have a friend that shooting a documentary. He needed a stable shot. You know what he did? He grabbed his Mavic and he did the shot because it's got a built-in gimbal, and he just didn't turn on the blades and just shot it.
He just held it.
Yeah, just handheld and got the shot he needed. No one ever knew, and it was fine. So this is technology people are using on the on the cheap, I guess, and I mean, all the gimbal companies are going to have to step it up too, and like, what new things can they offer? I remember seeing the first gimbal from Zhiyun Tech and from DJI that actually allowed you to have camera control within the handles and stuff. Now that's pretty normal across all gimbals. So what's the next thing that can make those better? I'm not sure. Lighter, easier to operate? I'm not sure.
Yeah, you can look at the low end and the high end now. I mean, this is not a cheap camera. I think, what is it, like $7,200 or something?
That's for the 8K. Yeah, I think it's in the mid $10,000, like 58 or something like that.
But so pretty expensive camera. We also have this on the low end with DJI's Osmo cameras. And so the question is, at what point do mid-level cameras have this gimbal kind of built in a way that is mainstream? I don't know. I don't know if it will happen or not, but can you imagine a $1,200 camera like a Sony Alpha that just has a gimbal kind of built in by default? I'm not sure about that.
I mean, stabilizing footage, I got the prices here, $7,200 and almost $11,500 for the 8K. So yeah, you're right. What I think, with Apple does a lot of computations in stabilizing their footage. I think they have a good reason to know that no one's going to post video that's all bouncy and everything. So they're working on electronic stabilization through computation in phones. Also, GoPro also spending lots of energy in that, and other action cameras and that kind of thing. But we're seeing, innovations in sensor stabilization. So we're getting new stabilizations outside of just optical stabilization that we can offer that are not gimbal. And everybody's been saying gimbal-like stabilization and that kind of thing. Yeah. But it's not really, I mean, you shoot some on a gimbal, you can do what you like, and it's awesome money versus, just going around handheld. But there's gimbals that are $100 for your phone.
Yeah, exactly.
That are rad and easy to use. And, even in the high end one, maybe it's $200. That's going to be rad for that. But surely all of the camera or the phone manufacturers have been working really hard to do that. I mean, it's one of the reasons why you have to accept what the iPhone shoots, is because if you got the footage before what Apple does to it, it wouldn't have any of the stabilization on it and the post-processing. And that's some of the biggest strength is the software in iPhones to not only make the footage look as best it can, but also stabilizing it.
Yeah. So, going back to the Zhiyun Tech, what do they do? I think that the market is going to hold steady for them in the sense that the hybrid shooter style cameras, the cameras that people are using for photography and the like, they will never have built-in gimbals, right? Like, photographers aren't going to put up with that.
There's no need for them.
Yeah, exactly. So as long as those cameras exist, I think that the dedicated gimbals will exist. You don't want to spend $100 to add that functionality on when you need it.
Totally, but on the high end, right? So you have your full-size camera. Now you have, I'm wearing a Steadicam and some way to support it. I mean, that's a lot of stuff to deal with. The question is that image quality from that camera worth all of that headache versus just having this ready-to-go shoot camera?
Probably depends on what happens with lens technology, right? Like, it's not unusual to see a 50-pound lens on a motion picture set.
Oh, yeah. And because you have a big old tripod that can handle it and all the rest, all those kinds of things. So I imagine we'll see all of it. I mean, drones of all kind are being used for all types of production, even if they are consumer drones. And then there's the professional stuff that's actually taking a cinema camera in the sky. So I think all of that It should be pretty interesting. I actually just thought about it though, is, Sony has the Peak drone, their new drone that you can put a Sony Alpha camera on. Maybe this is, so that's somewhat of a robot. I bet you Sony makes robots. I guarantee them in Japan, they may probably make robots of some sort. But this is robotic control, which they're at least doing probably at their factories, let alone having the technology into their tools. So we'll probably see some competition in here. The problem is it's probably pretty niche. So it's unlikely we're going to continue to see really vigorous competition in this category. But at least there's going to be another choice, right? Well, so whenever something comes out, there's always someone that can do it based on how they're positioned, that can put another option out there. Even if, you look in the drone market, DJI might own 85% of the drone market, but there's still some companies that are getting by with that 15%. So, being number 2, even if number 1 is a giant, is still probably pretty profitable.
So imagine what the next few years look like for DJI here, right? Like these cameras the gimbal technology of it could shrink down. The whole system could shrink down for all we know, so that it's not as cumbersome to use as a regular camera. Like you said, like this seems like it's a handheld camera primarily, and if you're not doing a lot of handheld, you wouldn't get it. But if like the GoPro, if the stabilizing technology was not a big distraction, I guess, from normal production, then maybe that just kind of becomes the default, in which case there is big problems, I guess, for the camera manufacturers, because if the same thing happens to the camera industry that happened with the drone industry, what are you going to see? Red and Canon and ARRI and all that splitting up the 15% of what's left?
Yeah.
I don't think so.
Or they'll just not have any interest in being there. And the difference there will be picture quality, right? It's really interesting. When I got the presentation, we got a lot of presentation about how this form factor, what it's supposed to be working with. And I have not seen any footage. I'm sure there's some on here, but I'm waiting to shoot my own. What's it look like? If it's 6K, cool. But there's other 6K cameras that are you can get 12K for $599 or something like that from Blackmagic right now. Obviously, probably about similar size camera. What are we getting there? Every brand's doing it a little different. The cool, like Sony's got their Catalyst, which is their post-production software that's taking in gyro data from your camera and information there to be able to get and control the post-production stabilization of your footage even more, getting to use the metadata from the phone, which is really innovative and awesome. This is the kind of stuff your phone's been doing, but getting that kind of technology into a camera, Sony's uniquely positioned to have both a phone and a camera. Cool. It makes sense that the phone technology is in here, and this is drone technology going into a camera. So it's just really perspective there. I'm still curious about how well it'll look. If I had to set up sticks, or I had a gimbal on a tripod or gimbal already set up, I might not set up the sticks. I might just do that shot handheld and hope it's stable enough.
Assuming it's a quick setup, right?
Yeah. Of course, there's all sorts of shooting involved, but there might be times where you're like, well, I'm not going to pull out my sticks because I don't need it. It's going to be stable enough. It's not going to be shaky or anything. And I don't want this to be static anyway. So a little bit of movement will be good. And that might make, faster productions. That would be great.
If you look at some of their sample footage here, it could easily be shot on a dolly, right? Like in terms of how smooth that, what are they called? The Z-axis stabilization is. Imagine being on set and not having to set up a dolly. Like it's that smooth.
Yeah. Well, or like I think of mounting on a vehicle or something, right? Like you no longer have to have that following truck or whatever. Like this is something you could probably, and we've already been mounting gimbals in that way, but now it's, far less, far smaller in that way. And really it'll be, I'm sure they'll be able to make this smaller. They always can make it smaller. It seems like, once you have the technology and there's a desire for people to buy it, then they'll put the energy into doing it otherwise. Now, the one thing I can say that I'll be curious in time if we have any of these issues, because DJI is a Chinese company, and that we start to see other people's technology showing up in their products. or whatever it is. I'd be curious about that just because they have a whole different view on copyright and all the rest. It would be interesting to see how that could play out, because I'm sure there's just so much competitive benefit for the way the Chinese government has their industry and all the rest, that it just makes it really hard for entities that aren't as big as the Chinese government to do those things and to get that data. So it'll be interesting. I don't think that there's anything outward, and definitely nothing we know of that DJI is doing as far as stealing information about the biggest rumors that they're using the drone footage to make maps of the U.S. or something. And I'm like, just go to Google Earth, see what we find.
Do you think you could put a matte box on this? I bet you can't.
Yeah, it'd probably be hard.
Looks like, just off the balance issues aside, looks like it would block the LiDAR sensor for whatever that's worth.
Well, let's face it. What do you use a matte box for? You use it to block, to help hold contrast, right? To help lens glares and that kind of stuff. There's probably a hood or a lens hood that goes on them, just like any kind of lens has a hood to do the same thing. But they're there to hold ND filters, right? Like in cinema cameras, they're used for filters and the rest. So, you don't need those. They're built in. So maybe it's not as necessary.
Well, unless you're putting other kinds of filters on there, putting a polarizer, or you just need the like I said, the hood, the shade.
You got a glint that's coming from a certain direction.
Yeah, which is not, you don't really worry about that so much when you're doing a handheld, because it's kind of built into the process. But if you did want to put it on a set of sticks and under a controlled situation, you kind of want to flag off, stray light.
Yeah, I think there's going to be some workflow things that people run into that they're just not possible to use it for X, Y, or Z. But that's true for every camera. Every camera's got a limitation, and it's got a use case that's not going to work for. Yeah. But then there's going to be other ones where it's a home run, right? Those Steadicam operators that are getting older, I was like, oh, it's something lighter and I can do, same quality, and I don't have to, put damage on my knees or whatever it is. It might be the thing that changes Steadicam operation. I mean, what changed Steadicam operation? Well, the invention of it. And now, since motorized gimbals, we're seeing a lot less of those Steadicams.
So, prediction time, Chris. How long before DJI invents a robot that is a camera operator?
You mean make a PDC camera?
Well, I mean, like that walks around, that can climb stairs.
Yeah, is it going to have a bad attitude when it doesn't get the right food at its
especially Disney union membership?
Yeah, exactly. Is it pay dues? I hope not. But I think that probably the next step on this stuff is smaller and cheaper.
Yeah,
is likely. That seems to be how DJI does it.
Well, it's got to squeeze out the mid-level, right? It's already as small and cheap as it can get, practically, with the Osmo level.
Yeah, well, and the Osmo is not. They're not doing the same interchangeable lens. All that, like, they're not putting the high-end camera anymore. It's the small guy.
Don't they have a handheld camera or handheld Osmo that has the Zenmuse?
I'm not sure if they're making it anymore.
Oh,
but let's see here. It would be in the Osmo. It looks like they have the Pocket 2. Otherwise,
DJI Osmo Pro Zenmuse.
It'd be Zenmuse, yeah. And gimbals, it's not in there.
DJI Osmo Pro handheld 4K.
What cameras to put on the Zenmuse X7?
I don't know here. DJI Osmo Pro RAW. Yeah, I think we reviewed this years ago.
Has it got the big plate on it and everything? I don't know if they're selling that one anymore that takes SSDs that goes underneath it.
Yeah.
The idea there was that you're going to have an Inspire, and you're going to take the camera off the Inspire and put it on the little handle, and then you can use them interchangeably. But I think that's a farther stretch than using this on sticks.
Confirmed that the Osmo Pro and RAW is no longer in production.
Yeah. Yeah, it didn't last long. Well, that was kind of a cumbersome thing. That was this big.
Well, that was the mid-level, right? So maybe the mid-level isn't a thing.
Yeah. Well, but I mean, DJI does such a great job of like making subsets underneath their their drones at least, right?
Yeah.
And they're so good at like that. Yeah, we're going to discontinue the 2 because we're going to make a new model, and that's going to be all the technology in this super cheap version, like the Spark or whatever. Those small drones, like those things compete with the Phantom 4 for features and picture set. And it's like Phantom 4 was this big thing and it was expensive, and then it's like, oh, here's a $400 one. Does the same thing, fits in your pocket. So they tend to have that release process. So I can imagine they'll probably go along the same thing. But I mean, I wasn't expecting to have a camera.
I've been surprised by DJI many times. So who knows what they'll come out with.
They're sly. I mean, they're from just staying ahead of the curve. I mean, they're just always introducing something that will make it, just like Apple does. And they're releasing that thing that you can't get anywhere else. And it's like, that's the thing that drew you to it in the first place. And you're like, well, I guess I got to get that. So, but you got to get a haircut. So I think I got
a bolt. So let's call it there, right?
Yeah.
All right. Thanks everyone for tuning in. We'll catch you next time. Big thanks to everyone for listening. As always, if you want to support the show, we'd love it if you subscribe to our newsletter. We deliver it several times a week, and we deliver all kinds of tutorials and reviews and buyer's guides straight to your inbox. So you can sign up for that at videomaker.com/newsletter. It's the best way to support what we do here. So for Chris Munlux and everyone here at Videomaker, I'm Mike Wilhelm, and you've been listening to the Videomaker Podcast. We'll catch you next time.